Sad, man. The way he died, man, was heartbreaking, man. Got killed in LA. You know, a female, she lied on him, you know, then got him set up. The same female got him set up, man.
Can you sing?
Nah.
Can you play an instrument?
Nah.
What, man? May I cut in?
Nah, you can't cut in, man.
Yo. Yeah, they did Merlin dirty, man. And
Real dirty.
they did him dirty, man.
Some stars spend their whole lives chasing the spotlight, trying to make their names glow. But then there are the rare ones, the ones who finally touch fame only for darkness to snatch it away in an instant. That's exactly what happened to Romeo Santana. When the Steve Harvey Show put him on screen, he wasn't just acting, he became the show's breakout star, the face everyone was talking about. But just months later, everything came crashing down in the worst way possible. In 2002, at only 26 years old, Romeo Santana's life ended so suddenly that even people who never knew him felt the shock. Hollywood lost a rising star before he could even show the world what he was truly capable of. And the worst part, it wasn't his fault, not at all. It all began with one lie told by a 15-year-old girl, one misunderstanding that spiraled out of control, one reckless moment, and then everything ended with a single shot.
My good friend Merlin Santana, first of all, he was a very genuine dude. He was always on 10. The first time I met Merlin, we were doing Hang with Mr. Cooper. The man was a very good actor.
How did a life so bright fade so fast? Why did fate target Romeo Santana like this? Let's go back to where it all began. Harlem, Manhattan in the 1970s. The home of jazz, hip-hop, and pure black creativity was about to witness the start of something incredible. Harlem in the late 70s was no easy place to grow up. Poverty ruled the streets, chaos never slept, and the echo of police sirens stretched from sunset to sunrise. In the middle of all that noise and struggle, a baby boy named Merlin Santana was born on March 14th, 1976, a Dominican kid with eyes that practically glowed.
When they said cut, what y'all doing later? Oh man, we coming over here. We started hanging out with my crew of people. He came from New York, came by himself from New York. So we were like his family out here. The type of dude that would go the extra mile for the joke in real life. Sorry, bro, I gotta tell this one.
People used to say, look at him, that boy's meant for more than Harlem. His mom, Rosina Santana, knew her neighborhood inside and out. She'd seen too many kids barely in their teens get pulled into gangs or lose their lives over senseless street beefs. She refused to let her son become another tragic story, so when Merlin was just 3 years old, she made a bold move. She started taking him to small acting studios across the city. She signed him up for modeling gigs, auditions, and kids acting classes, not to chase fame, but to keep him safe.
It was one of those type of things, we all go out, we party, we leave, boom, everybody's knocked out, wake up the next day, let's get it going. And there was a bottle of Snapple on the ledge of the fireplace. And this particular friend just picked up the bottle and started drinking in the morning. And we heard him go, and spit it out. And Merlin comes running out the back. Who drank it? Who drank it?
Resina saw something special in her son, something that could lift him out of Harlem's grip. From the start, Merlin was built different. He wasn't scared of cameras, never froze under pressure, and always locked eyes with the director like he'd been doing this his whole life. Even as a little kid, he had the focus and confidence of a grown professional trapped inside a child's body. One photographer couldn't believe what he was seeing. He said, that kid doesn't even need direction. He already knows where to stand, where to look. It's unreal. And he was right. At just 3 years old, Merlin already knew how to switch it on for the camera like he was born for it.
This motherfucker, we knew would be one. Of course, he pissed in the Snapple bottle. Like, why would you piss in the Snapple bottle? Because we knew this motherfucker was gonna drink just some wild ass, like, it's some frat boy shit. But it was funny to us. We laughed. He liked who we liked.
By 5, he was modeling. By 8, he was starring in commercials. And by 10, he was stepping onto real TV sets. While other kids ran wild on set, chasing each other around and laughing too loud, Merlin would sit in the corner quietly rehearsing his lines. Focused, calm, and determined. It was like he already understood that art wasn't just a dream, it was his lifeline out of Harlem. Plenty of child stars from tough neighborhoods end up losing themselves in bad choices, drugs, gangs, violence. But not Merlin. Even as a kid, he carried himself with maturity way beyond his age. No pointless hangouts, no shady friends, no getting caught up in the street life. In a place where kids barely in middle school were already getting into trouble, Merlin stood out. Every time he heard shouting or sirens outside, he'd glance at his mom with that serious look like he was telling himself, I'm not dying here. His climb to fame wasn't luck. It was survival mixed with pure talent. By the time he hit his teenage years, Merlin wasn't just another kid from Harlem. He was a young actor with years of real on-camera experience and the kind of discipline that set him apart from everyone else. By 1991, Merlin was only 15 years old, but he carried himself with more confidence and class than most adults twice his age. At that time, The Cosby Show was the biggest thing on TV, the gold standard, the Harvard of television. Yet here came this kid from Harlem, walking into that casting room like he belonged there. When Merlin read those lines, it wasn't just an audition, it was transformation. He became the character, and when he finished, the whole room felt it. There was zero doubt. He was born to play Stanley, Rudy Huxtable's charming boyfriend. Imagine it. A 15-year-old from Harlem suddenly acting shoulder to shoulder with TV legends. Most young actors would have crumbled under that kind of pressure, but not Merlin. Every time he spoke, he owned the screen with that calm, polite, and effortlessly cool energy that made audiences remember him instantly. Even though he appeared in just a handful of episodes, his role as Stanley became unforgettable. It was his big break, the moment that lit the fuse on his career. And when he left The Cosby Show, he didn't fade into the background like so many other child stars. Nope, Merlin was just getting started. He threw himself right into a brand new wave of TV roles, ready to prove he wasn't a one-hit wonder. From Major Dad to Sister, and Hanging with Mr. Cooper, Merlin Santana left a mark every single time he showed up on screen. Even if his role lasted just a few minutes, people remembered him. That charm was unforgettable. But everything changed with one show, The Steve Harvey Show. That was the moment Merlin went from talented actor to full-blown national icon. In 1996, he walked into the audition for a brand new WB sitcom, and every young actor in town wanted the same role. Romeo Santana, the smooth-talking, confident, sweethearted high school heartthrob who stole every scene and every crush's attention. When Merlin stepped into that room, the energy shifted instantly. He read his lines, flashed that signature grin, Romeo's grin, and tilted his head with a kind of natural swagger that no script could ever teach. The writers couldn't believe it. He was Romeo before they even finished writing him. Steve Harvey himself said later, he wasn't acting as Romeo, he was Romeo. That one audition changed everything. From there, Merlin's career took off like wildfire. The Steve Harvey Show ran for 6 amazing seasons, from 1996 to 2002, becoming one of the biggest and most loved black sitcoms of the 90s. And through it all, one thing was certain. Romeo Santana had officially become America's ultimate teenage crush. Female fans couldn't get enough of him. They sent letters to the WB asking, "Does Romeo show up in this week's episode?" That's how deep the obsession ran. The ratings climbed higher every week, his paycheck grew, and suddenly everyone wanted a piece of Merlin Santana. He was popping up on talk shows, featured in teen magazines, and his posters were pinned on bedroom walls all across America. By his early 20s, Merlin had officially joined the circle of Hollywood's most in-demand young black stars. But even with all the fame, he wasn't satisfied with just being the funny, smooth guy from a sitcom. He wanted more. He craved real depth, movie scripts with emotion, power, and purpose. In 2001, Merlin took a bold leap into film with Floss, an independent project that let him explore heavier, more dramatic roles than television ever had. It showed everyone that there was more to him than charm. He had layers, and he could act with heart. Then came 2002, the year that should have changed everything for good. Merlin landed a role in Showtime, an action comedy from MGM starring 2 Hollywood powerhouses, Eddie Murphy and Robert De Niro. This wasn't just another job, it was a golden ticket straight into the world of A-list fame. The movie pulled in nearly $80 million worldwide, a massive success for a buddy cop flick. But Merlin wasn't stopping there. Off camera, he started pouring his creativity into rap, a raw new side of himself that fans had never truly seen before. He was leveling up, showing the world that his talent stretched way beyond the sitcom stage. Merlin wasn't chasing fame. He was chasing expression. He paid for his own studio time, stayed up late in Crenshaw recording track after track, pouring his story into every beat. His lyrics told his journey, from Harlem's gritty blocks to the bright lights of Los Angeles, from poverty to stardom. Rap wasn't just a hobby for him. It was his way of going back to Harlem, not as a kid trying to escape, but as a man who'd found his voice. At the same time, he kept showing up on screen, taking roles in shows like Half and Half, Moshe, and VH1's played A Hip-Hop Story. Bit by bit, Hollywood started realizing that Merlin Santana wasn't just an actor, he was a multi-talented force. Directors wanted him in auditions, producers were reaching out for music collabs, and TV execs were lining up to cast him in new projects. By 26, his career was blowing up in every direction. Acting, music, television, he had it all moving. And the best part? Everyone who worked with Merlin had nothing but love for him. Steve Harvey once said, "That kid was never late, never disrespectful. He showed up to work, ready to perform, not to act like a star." Merlin never got caught up in Hollywood's dark side. No drugs, no club drama, no scandals, no messy headlines. He stayed focused, grounded, and humble. He had every quality of a future A-lister: the discipline, the drive, the heart, but life never gave him the extra time he deserved. Because in November 2002, one unbelievable, reckless lie tore everything apart and ended Merlin Santana's story far too soon. The tragedy of Romeo Santana began with one deadly misunderstanding. One lie that changed everything in November 2002. At that time, Merlin Santana was at his peak, steady career, growing fame, and endless possibilities ahead. At just 26, he wasn't just a beloved TV star anymore. He was breaking into movies, music, and creative projects that were finally showing the full range of his talent. He lived in Crenshaw, a place full of heart and community pride, but also carrying the weight of street tension, noise, and danger. It was the kind of neighborhood that tested your focus. Many entertainers stayed away from it completely. But for artists like Merlin, that same energy was inspiring. It was real life, raw, creative, and full of stories worth telling. One night in early November 2002, between recording sessions, Merlin and his close friend, actor Brandon Adams, stopped by a local restaurant near the studio to grab some food. That's where they met a young woman who introduced herself as Mercedes. She seemed mature, confident, maybe around 20 or 21, and she carried herself like someone used to being around older people. She chatted with Merlin easily, smiling, laughing, asking about his music. Nothing felt off or suspicious. To everyone there, she just seemed like another fan who appreciated his work. But what no one in that room knew, not even Merlin, was that Mercedes had a boyfriend. His name was Damien, and his presence would change everything that night. Her real name was Andre Gates, just 19 years old, and nobody knew she was tied to a circle of guys with messy reputations, young men known for bad tempers, constant drama, and overreacting when things didn't go their way. None of that was visible on the surface, though, and Merlin had no clue the storm that was quietly building around him. Then came the second encounter, the first real warning sign. Just a few days after meeting her, Merlin called Mercedes and invited her to stop by the studio to see him record. It was something he did often. He liked showing friends or new connections how his music came together. To him, it was harmless, but he didn't realize that this girl was walking in with way more baggage than she looked like she carried. When Mercedes arrived, Merlin's friend Brandon Adams, who had lived in Los Angeles for years, immediately felt something was off. She couldn't stay still. Her eyes kept darting around the room like she was nervous about something. Her energy didn't match the chill vibe of the studio at all. After only a few minutes, she suddenly said she had to go. Brandon felt uneasy and decided to keep an eye on her as she left. That's when he noticed something that made his stomach drop. She walked straight over to a dark SUV parked nearby, and inside sat several older men watching the studio. At that moment, neither Merlin nor Brandon had any idea what was unfolding outside that studio. The young woman, Mercedes, whose real name was Andre Gates, had told the men in that dark SUV a story that was completely false. She accused Merlin and Brandon of acting inappropriately toward her, a claim that wasn't true at all, something she would later admit herself. But that single lie set off a chain of events that would destroy everything. The men didn't bother to check the facts or ask a single question. They believed her instantly. And that blind trust turned dangerous fast. One misunderstanding, one reckless decision, that was all it took. Damien Andre Gates, Mercedes' boyfriend, already had a reputation for being quick-tempered and unpredictable. When he heard her false story, he immediately saw Merlin and Brandon as enemies, people he had to confront. Without hesitation, Damien called his friend Brandon Douglas Bynes, age 23, and the two made a violent plan. They decided to head over to the studio that night, wait outside, and teach them a lesson. But what they brought with them weren't words or questions. They came armed and ready to act without thinking. In the early hours of November 9th, 2002, after spending hours recording music, Merlin and Brandon Adams finally wrapped up their session. Around 3 a.m., they stepped out of the studio, unaware that danger was already waiting for them in the shadows. There was no warning that anything was wrong that night. Merlin and Brandon thought it was just another long studio session coming to an end. They got into the car, tired but content, Brandon behind the wheel, Merlin buckling his seatbelt like he always did. Everything felt normal for a split second, until it wasn't. As the car began to roll forward, Brandon noticed a faint red light reflect across the window, and before he could even process it, a loud bang shattered the quiet night. Panic hit instantly. Brandon tried to keep control of the car, but the attack had already struck its target. Within seconds, tragedy hit, and Merlin's promising life was suddenly gone. Brandon, injured and dazed from the chaos, somehow managed to keep driving just long enough to reach a safer spot and call for help. But when the car finally came to a stop, it was clear that Merlin wasn't responding. Just like that, at only 26 years old, a bright future full of talent and dreams was taken away in one unthinkable moment. And when the Los Angeles police arrived at the scene in the early hours of November 9th, 2002, they could tell right away, this wasn't random. The damage, the location, the timing, none of it pointed to an accident. Something deliberate had happened, and investigators were about to uncover a truth far darker than anyone expected. The shattered windows, the dents from different angles, everything told the same story. This wasn't random. It was targeted, deliberate, and carefully planned. The police immediately knew they were dealing with something serious. Inside that damaged car, Brandon Adams was the only surviving witness. He was still trembling from the shock, but his mind stayed sharp. When officers questioned him, Brandon described the mysterious young woman who had called herself Mercedes. He said she looked around 20 or 21, wore heavy makeup, and carried herself with confidence, the kind of poise that made her seem far older than she really was. Nobody in that studio had guessed for a second that she might have been underage. Brandon explained how Mercedes had entered the studio casually, walking through a room full of adults like she'd done it 100 times before. She didn't stand out, didn't act nervous. Nothing about her set off alarms. For investigators, that was the key. To solve this case, they had to find Mercedes fast. So, over the next few days, detectives spread out across the Crenshaw area, hitting every local spot, corner stores, car shops, food stands, asking questions, showing photos, looking for anyone who had seen her. A few people said they remembered a young woman matching the description, first spotted at the studio, then seen walking toward a dark SUV waiting nearby. But the real breakthrough came when police found an old security camera outside a small neighborhood shop. The grainy footage it captured turned out to be the silent witness that would finally start revealing the truth. The security footage didn't last long, just a few blurry seconds. But it was enough. Detectives could make out her figure, her hairstyle, even the confident way she walked. That tiny clip became the missing puzzle piece. From there, investigators got to work fast, running facial matches, checking local records, scanning databases, and sharing info across agencies. Then, finally, a name popped up: Monique King. Age 15 years old. The whole team was stunned. The girl everyone assumed was around 21, the one who called herself Mercedes, was actually a runaway teenager using multiple fake names. She'd gone by Monique Lewis, Kia, and of course Mercedes, depending on who she was trying to fool. Nobody could believe it. A 15-year-old moving through Los Angeles like an adult, slipping in and out of music studios, dating an older boyfriend, and without even realizing it, standing in the middle of a tragedy that had shocked Hollywood. When police finally brought Monique into the interrogation room, her calmness threw them off. She didn't cry, didn't panic. She spoke like someone used to pretending, like switching stories was second nature. At first, she kept things vague. I don't know those two guys. I only stopped by the studio for a few minutes. Nothing happened. I don't remember meeting anyone named Merlin. But detectives weren't buying it. Each time she tried to twist her version, they dropped new evidence. The surveillance footage, eyewitness statements, phone records, and she'd shift her story again. The pattern was too clear to miss. By that point, investigators knew one thing for certain: Monique King wasn't telling the full truth. She knew exactly what had happened that night, and she was doing everything she could to hide it. The breakthrough came when detectives finally got access to Monique's phone records, and what they found changed everything. Her call logs showed constant contact with Damien and Andre Gates in the hours leading up to the shooting. There were nervous, half-written text messages and even a long phone call just minutes before she left the studio that night. The timeline lined up perfectly, and it was impossible to ignore. When police confronted Monique with the evidence, her story started to fall apart fast. The calm, collected attitude disappeared. She broke down, saying through tears, "I didn't want this to happen. I only lied because I was scared my boyfriend would get mad." After hours of questioning, investigators finally recorded the confession that would unlock the entire case. Monique King admitted that Merlin Santana and Brandon Adams had done absolutely nothing wrong. The story she told her boyfriend, the lie that set everything in motion, was completely made up. That moment changed the course of the investigation. With her confession officially on record, the truth finally started to unfold. Police wasted no time. They issued arrest warrants and began rounding up everyone involved. It didn't take long for them to track down Damian Andre Gates, the man responsible for pulling the trigger that night. He was just 19 years old, yet already linked to several violent run-ins and a history of trouble that made this tragedy feel even more heartbreaking. Police moved in quickly, surrounding the small apartment near Crenshaw where Damian Andre Gates was hiding out. The place was known to attract restless young men looking for a place to crash. When the officers burst through the door, Damian didn't fight back. He simply lifted his hands, calm and silent, like he already knew this moment was coming. Inside the apartment, detectives found everything they needed. The weapon used in the attack was recovered, perfectly matching the bullet from the scene. Parked just outside was the same dark SUV captured on the security camera footage. And when they checked his phone data, it confirmed what they already suspected. Damian's location placed him near the studio at the exact time of the shooting. The evidence was overwhelming, stacked layer after layer, leaving his defense with nothing to argue. But the case wasn't over yet. Next came Brandon Douglas Bynes, age 23, the passenger in the SUV that night. He wasn't the one who fired the shot, but he had been there for the entire event from start to finish. When police caught up with him, he tried to deny everything at first, claiming he just happened to be in the area and didn't know what had happened. However, detectives came prepared. They laid out the full timeline, the SUV's route, Monique's testimony, the phone logs, and the truth became impossible to escape. Under pressure, Bynes finally broke down and confessed. He admitted that he was there, that he stood by Damian through it all, and that he never tried to stop what happened. With both men in custody, the stage was set for the next chapter. Justice was finally about to speak. The first verdict dropped in February 2004, and it hit like a thunderclap. Damian Gates, just 19 years old, stood before the judge, finally facing the weight of everything he had done. The courtroom fell silent as the sentence was read. 3 consecutive life terms plus 70 additional years with no chance of parole. No escape, no second chance. His freedom ended that day, and everyone in the room knew it. A few weeks later came the sentencing of Brandon Douglas Bynes in March 2004. As the hearing began, Bynes stood trembling, his hands locked tightly together. He kept his head down the entire time, unable to meet the eyes of Merlin Santana's family sitting just a few feet away. When the judge finally announced the decision, 23 years in state prison, Brandon broke down completely. He didn't argue, didn't try to act tough. He accepted it. Deep down, he knew the truth. He had followed the wrong person, and now he was paying for that choice with almost all the years of his youth. Then came the most haunting moment of all. March 17, 2004. The courtroom turned silent as Monique King stepped forward to hear her fate. She was only 15 years old, yet her actions had set off a chain of events that took an innocent life and shattered countless others. Standing between 2 officers, she looked small, shaking, and overwhelmed by the gravity of what she had caused. The truth was undeniable. This entire tragedy had begun with her lie, and now everyone was living with the cost of it. Her lie was the spark that set everything in motion. The one moment of fear that led to the tragedy that ended Merlin Santana's life. Legally, the situation was complicated. Monique King was still a minor, and though she hadn't meant for anyone to die, she had created the story that fueled Damian's rage. She never pulled a trigger, but her actions started a chain reaction she could never take back. The defense argued that Monique was a runaway teenager, manipulated and influenced by older people who should have known better. They said she didn't understand the weight of her words, that a 15-year-old brain simply can't grasp how far one reckless lie can go. She wasn't evil, they said, just scared, desperate, and trying to protect herself in the wrong way. Prosecutors debated for weeks, weighing her age against the seriousness of what happened. Finally, they made their decision. Monique would be charged within the juvenile system. On April 21st, 2004, the court gave its final ruling. 10 years in a juvenile correctional facility, the maximum penalty allowed for someone her age. She would remain there until she turned 25. When the sentence was announced, Monique broke down crying. Not the tears of a hardened criminal, but of a frightened girl, realizing, maybe for the first time, how one impulsive lie had destroyed so many lives. Her tears were for herself, for Damian and Brandon, and most of all, for Merlin Santana, whose bright future was gone forever. For Merlin's family, that pain never faded. They didn't see him as just Romeo Santana from The Steve Harvey Show or Stanley from The Cosby Show. To the public, he was a star. But to them, Merlin was their son, their brother, their heartbeat, a life stolen far too soon. To his family, Merlin Santana wasn't just a star, he was everything. He was the son who brought light into their lives, the brother who made them proud, the young father who carried their hopes for a better future. He was the one strong enough to lift his loved ones out of the shadows of New York's toughest neighborhoods. That's why his loss wasn't just heartbreaking, it was a wound that would never truly heal. Merlin left behind a little girl, his daughter, the greatest joy of his life. She was too young to understand what loss meant, but she knew one thing for sure: her dad wasn't coming to pick her up anymore. Family members later said that for months after the tragedy, she would line up 2 pairs of shoes by the door, one for her and one for her dad. She'd say softly, "These are for when daddy comes home from work." One day, she turned to her grandmother and asked, "Why isn't daddy calling me like he does every day?" The room went quiet. Nobody could find the words. How could anyone explain something that painful to a child? Before his death, Merlin had been saving up to take her to Disneyland that Thanksgiving. She even had a tiny princess dress waiting for the trip, the one he bought just for her. It became more than a costume. It was the last piece of his promise, a reminder of the love and dreams they never got to share. Merlin Santana never lived like a reckless celebrity chasing headlines. He loved deeply but guarded his private life with quiet strength. A close friend once said, Merlin never let the press touch his personal world. He moved with maturity, no chaos, no wild rumors, just a man trying to live right and love responsibly. For a while, he shared a home with the mother of his daughter, building a family with real intention and heart. But fate had other plans and time didn't give him the years he deserved. When he was gone, his loved ones could have easily fallen apart, but they didn't. They stood together and found strength in each other's memories of him. His mother chose to live quietly, refusing interviews and public attention. His sister launched a youth support foundation in Washington Heights, turning her grief into purpose. And his daughter was kept far away from the media, protected from the noise of fame and tragedy. The family made one unbreakable promise: never let Merlin's name fade away. They vowed to keep his story alive, not just as a tale of loss, but as a reminder of the talent, love, and light he brought into the world. Merlin's passing wasn't just a private heartbreak. It sent shockwaves far beyond his family. Fans, friends, and even strangers felt the weight of such a senseless loss. When the news broke on the morning of November 10th, 2002, Hollywood froze in disbelief. Within hours, studios, talk shows, and entire fan communities fell silent. The city that had once cheered for him now mourned him, and that silence spoke louder than any words ever could. No one could wrap their head around it. Not because Merlin Santana was some untouchable global superstar, but because he was one of the few young actors in Hollywood who truly did everything right. No scandals, no chaos, no bad headlines. Just a hard-working artist with a clean record and a future full of promise. Everyone believed he'd live long, build a legacy, and keep shining for decades to come. When the news broke, even the media didn't know how to process it. Variety, the outlet famous for breaking Hollywood stories first, used only 3 words to describe it: shot, dead, senseless. Those words hit harder than any headline could. The Los Angeles Times called it a completely unnecessary tragedy, emphasizing that Merlin had done absolutely nothing to deserve what happened to him. Morning broadcasts across the country echoed the heartbreak with one headline: Merlin Santana, star of The Steve Harvey Show, dead at 26. The tone was heavy, the sadness real. America had lost not just a performer, but a person whose life represented dedication and discipline. For the press, this wasn't just another Hollywood story. It was a national shockwave. Reporters and fans alike couldn't make sense of it. A rising actor, beloved for his charm and work ethic, gone because of one senseless lie. Even those who had never met him felt it. A deep, quiet sadness that followed the industry for months. Inside Hollywood, Merlin's co-stars and colleagues were stunned into silence. Some cried during interviews, others simply couldn't find the words. The entertainment world had lost one of its brightest young voices. Not to scandal, not to fame, but to something tragically pointless. Shock and heartbreak spread through Hollywood instantly. The same day the news broke, people who had worked with Merlin Santana couldn't believe it. Steve Harvey, who had shared 6 seasons with Merlin on The Steve Harvey Show, was said to have completely frozen when he got the call. He reportedly just sat down and whispered, "No, no way, not him." Another co-star from the show later shared in a resurfaced interview, "I always thought Merlin would become a major star. He was kind, he was driven. Nobody deserved what happened to him." According to Entertainment Tonight, Brandy, who had worked with Merlin on Moshe, was completely devastated by the news. The two had formed a friendship during filming, and hearing about his death hit her hard. Across the entertainment world, young actors from that era posted heartfelt tributes. "We lost a brother. Merlin was light everywhere he went, a talent that never got the chance to shine fully." Not one person had anything negative to say. Every memory shared painted the same picture: kind, humble, professional, and genuine to everyone he met. And it wasn't just Hollywood grieving. Fans across America were crushed. Online forums and message boards overflowed with posts and tears. Many wrote messages like, "Romeo Santana was my teen crush, and I can't believe someone like Merlin is gone." For millions, this wasn't just the loss of an actor, it felt like losing a friend they grew up watching, someone who brought laughter, charm, and heart into their homes every week. For so many people, especially within the Black community, Merlin Santana wasn't just a familiar face on TV, he was part of their childhood. His episodes on The Cosby Show, Moshe, and The Steve Harvey Show weren't just entertainment, they were memories that raised a generation. Kids grew up watching him smile, joke, and charm his way through the screen, and families saw a reflection of their own stories in him. Even years after his passing, people still visit Merlin's gravesite in New York. Strangers stop by quietly, leaving flowers, photos, or small notes, whispering a few words of remembrance for the man who touched their hearts. His resting place has become more than a grave. It's a symbol of a legacy that ended too soon but never faded away. When Merlin Santana passed in November 2002, Hollywood didn't just lose a young actor, it lost a future. It lost a promise that was never fully realized. Merlin was on his way to becoming one of the greats, a star with talent, heart, and integrity. What hurts the most is knowing how much more he could have done if life had given him just a few more years. By 26, Merlin had already achieved what most actors spend decades chasing. He was a national sitcom star thanks to The Steve Harvey Show, and a rare example of versatility in an industry that often limits young Black talent. He was starting to break barriers, proving he could move between comedy, drama, and film with ease. But behind every success, there were projects, scripts, and dreams he never got to finish, an unfinished legacy that still echoes in every heart that remembers him. Before his life was cut short, Merlin Santana was standing right on the edge of greatness. He was auditioning for 3 major movies, one of them a leading role in a big studio action film. He'd also been invited to join a brand new sitcom on UPN and was deep in talks with a producer in New York. If life hadn't ended so soon, Merlin could have become a true multi-talent, an actor, rapper, and performer with the same star power as a young Will Smith. Hollywood lost a star, but Merlin lost a future that was already within reach. Despite his fame, he wasn't living rich. Reports said his TV pay ranged from $10,000 to $20,000 per episode, and guest spots paid less. Most of his money went toward his music, his family, and providing for his little daughter. He didn't leave behind a fortune, he left behind love, hard work, and inspiration. Years later, clips of Romeo Santana from The Steve Harvey Show still light up TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. Fans comment, "He was my whole childhood." Young Black actors say Merlin opened doors for them. Even Steve Harvey once said on his radio show, "Merlin was one of the young people I was most proud of. He had a future Hollywood never got to see." Merlin's story is tragic, but his legacy still shines bright. His energy, kindness, and talent continue to inspire new generations. A star gone too soon, but never forgotten. What do you think makes Merlin Santana worth remembering forever? His talent, his heart, or his story? Leave your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you in the next one.